Opposition lawyer in limbo Miguna has been asked to apply for Kenyan citizenship. The country's interior minister, Fred Matiang'i, told a parliamentary committee that the deported politician will have to make a formal request to regain his citizenship, as Mr. Miguna reportedly took Canadian citizenship in 1988, casting aspersions over Miguna's Kenyan passport. He added that anyone who took up citizenship of another country before the 2010 Constitution and hope they can get it back without following the process is lying to himself. According to him, there is no doubt Miguna was born in Kenya, but in line with the 2010 Constitution, anyone who took up citizenship of another country loses his or her Kenyan citizenship. Parliament enacted a law on how one regains that citizenship, end of quote. Meanwhile, other top Kenyan government officials are appearing before a parliamentary committee to answer questions about their handling of Miguna over his deportation from the country last week. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has suspended a deal with the United Nations to give residency to thousands of African migrants in exchange for Western nations resettling of the same number. Well, hours after announcing the deal, he put the plan on hold, saying he wants to speak with residents of South Tel Aviv, where many of the migrants live. Under the 5-year agreement with the UN Refugee Agency, some 16,250 African migrants who entered the country legally would be resettled in Western nations. African migrants and Israeli activists have been protesting outside the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. Well, a human rights activist Olatunji Lanre Barua joins us now. Good to have you on Network Africa. We understand some African migrants and even Israeli activists are protesting outside Prime Minister Netanyahu's office in Jerusalem. What do you make of the suspension of the relocation deal with the United Nations?
First and foremost, let me say thank you for having me here. On the suspension of the deal of the Israeli government with the United Nations, I think it might be a storm in a teacup after all, because you notice that the government has been very disposed to this deal. The government has tried as much as possible to find a middle ground on the refugee crisis. And that deal went on, it was agreed, and I think Canada has been very supportive of that deal. While the UN agency is supposed to coordinate with other countries that will be willing to take in some of the migrants. I was made to understand that it's a deal, a one-for-one deal, kind of. You process the legal status of one refugee, and then one refugee is moved to another country. I think the suspension, Benjamin Netanyahu said that he needed to take time to reevaluate certain terms and agreements in that particular deal. And it might be back on the table, but we have to also watch the far-right activists and their agitation in this.
And truthfully, a lot of people have been talking about this. Some have been criticizing his latest decision. Some have even said it's a display of perhaps weakness, that he is under pressure from his right-wing coalition. Do you think this is a threat to his administration?
No, I think Benjamin Netanyahu has faced more threats. Threats are more severe than this. He's presently even facing corruption trial as it stands right now. But everybody seems to feel that he has sold out to the liberals. And you have to also understand that the Likud party, that's Netanyahu's party, and the Jewish Home are far-right in all their leanings. They are not particularly friendly to refugees and migrants. So this will put him under pressure. But just as he has said, that they are going to be meeting with the communities today, and I hope they are able to find a middle ground in this. It's a catch-22 for the Israeli government as it is, but I don't think it will threaten his government.
But the Supreme Court of Israel had blocked deportations of African migrants bill to commence on Sunday. Do you see a crisis brewing between the country's judiciary and the government?
No, the Supreme Court's decision was, as far as I am concerned, a lot of people are concerned. It was a very positive one for the refugees. And you find that academics, doctors, poets, a lot of activists across Israel were opposed to the decision to forcefully, repatriate refugees in the first instance. And so there was a march, a rally in which we had over 25,000 people gathered. And so that tells you that the far right are in one direction, and also there are people who are permissive and liberal towards the refugees, considering the fact that even Israel in itself is a refugee state. If you follow the history on how most of the Jewish people were able to repatriate and return back to the present Israel that we have today. So a lot of them are permissive, a lot of them are also opposed to it, but the decision of the court is right, and I commend it personally.
All right, finally, about 37,000 Africans, their fate are hanging in the balance, and, Israel has posed a moral dilemma, seeing that it's also a state with a national home for many. What do you think his next decision would be, having, paused this?
What, you mean the next decision
for
of
the Prime Minister?
The government?
Yes. Do you see them
because of the suspension of the day?
Yes. Do you see a turnaround?
Well, it's difficult. It's a catch-22. The government is is in between the rock and a hard place. You have to satisfy the far right base of the hardliners in the party. You also, have to maintain your friendship and relationship with the West. A lot of people, many friends of Israel, feel that the decision to send refugees out is particularly harsh because a lot of countries are being supportive of the Israeli government. I think there will be a middle ground. There was an earlier deal with Rwanda and Uganda, I suppose, and most of them, pressure from their home countries forced them to back out. And even this one, you find, since the UN is involved, I think we'll be able to find a middle ground at the end of the day.
All right.
But when you look at the refugees, nobody wants to go home.
All right, thank you so much.
Most of them, especially the Eritreans, are saying, yeah.
Apologies, but thank you so much. That's the much we can take at this time. Mr. Larry Barua joined us from our Abuja studios. Still to come on the program, new Ethiopia Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed pledges readiness to resolve disputes with neighboring Eritrea. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.